Every time I come before you, I take it as an opportunity to try and report, really, because I am working basically for the sector that you represent. So allow me to start by talking about Senate Bill number 3199. Most recently, a popular clamor for institutional reform in the housing sector has intensified, especially among concerned private sector groups, the academic and government policymakers. Specifically, the focus of their concerns revolved on the need to reorganize, strengthen, and reintegrate the different government shelter agencies and their corresponding functions that would result in the formulation of a more cohesive, responsive, coordinated, and focused approach in promoting and developing sustainable communities with affordable and accessible shelter plus minimum human security services, utilities, and livelihood opportunities. Pardon my bias, but ever since this proposition had been presented to my committee, I took the firm belief that this is simply a positive attempt to revisit and reconsider what the Ministry of Human Settlement Programs all along had been espousing. Needless to say, I do appreciate and I am personally happy about this policy development. I have to declare that with this move to intensify the measures to create the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or DHUD, we have indeed come full circle. As I reported to you in your second convention, there were 3 Senate versions of bills proposing to create the department. As early as February of last year, my committee has been holding hearings to discuss these proposals. The HUDCC had also presented its own version, and the Senate Committee on Rules likewise presented its interpretation of the submitted provisions. So after months of consultations with all of you and all the various stakeholders, including real estate developers, the socialized housing associations, and the academic community, amongst others, the committee had finally come up with a final version which was submitted to the plenary, to the Senate plenary, last July 27th. And on that day, my friends, the Senate had finally approved the draft bill on its 3rd and final reading. We are now awaiting the version of the House of Representatives so we can discuss the 2 bills in a bicameral committee. What provisions in this bill are so significant to affect the socialized housing industry, which merits our attention and concern? The answer lies in the 3 major provisions of the bill, as I'm sure you have all seen. The stated declaration of policies provides the socio-economic philosophy of the bill. I know that you have heard this before, and I've relayed these declarations to you, but allow me to restate at least one of the statements that are in the bill. And I quote, "Urban or rural poor dwellers shall not be evicted, nor their dwelling demolished except in accordance with the law." As members of the HUDCC, the last foregoing sentence will surely catch your attention. Having reread the underlying philosophy of the bill before this assembly, I believe that the stated declaration completely and satisfactorily describes the intent of the Senate in passing the bill on housing and urban development. In order also to give substance and implementing mechanism to the above stated philosophy, the Senate bill proposes to create the Department of Housing and Urban Development, thereby abolishing the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council created under EO number 90, and effectively transferring its functions and powers to the proposed department. And thirdly, the powers of the Housing Land Use Regulatory Board, or HLURB, are likewise transferred to the department, except its adjudicatory function. Effectively, the bill mandates that the HLURB shall be reconstituted as the Human Settlements Adjudicatory Commission, making it an independent commission attached to the department exclusively responsible for its adjudication functions. Its 9 full-time commissioners shall have the rank equivalent to that of Associate Justice of the Court of Appeals and shall hold office for 6 years. So essentially, by merging the Housing and Urban Development Coordinating Council and the Housing and Land Use Regulatory Board, the proposed Department of Housing and Urban Development shall act as a primary national government entity responsible for the management of housing and urban development in the country. And that is what we have managed to do in passing this bill, which creates the Department of Housing. And after we have congratulated ourselves, we must now think, where do we go from here? Now that the main single legislative agenda for housing and urban development has passed the Senate, I would like to interest you and discuss with you and maybe bounce off you some ideas about what we should do in the future and what are the issues that we should be addressing. Foremost in the agenda of my committee is the issue of a comprehensive national resettlement policy that shall include, amongst others, a common framework for strategies on resettlement, the physical and operational implementation of involuntary settlements, and the financial considerations demanded by such a policy. Let us for a moment pause to consider the massive and involuntary settlement brought about by typhoons Enel and Helen and all their predecessors, and with their accompanying refugee requirements, locational spaces required to transfer residences of informal settlers, welfare requirements to buttress the immediate food and clothing needs, and the infrastructural considerations for the relocation site and repair existing utilities and services. Imagine the extent of flood damage from Ilocos, including Baguio, down to Pangasinan, along MacArthur Highway, bypassing Central Luzon and culminating in Metro Manila and finally Manila Bay. These floods along the western part of Luzon were further aggravated by the rushing waters from Calabarzon provinces, with Laguna de Bay as the main catch basin. My colleagues in the housing sector, the answer is simple and obvious. We should realize by now the hundreds of thousands of urban and rural dwellers displaced by floods that will need resettlement. Think for a moment of the enormous amount of funds the government has to raise to build relocation sites, repair badly damaged infrastructure, and the huge manpower component to implement them. This is the main reason why, in the beginning of my speech, I declared that the enormity of the challenge before us has sounded an alert alarm in the halls of Senate, more particularly in my committee. A recent World Bank study, however, contends that the act is simply a shelter or housing law. The law does not give protection to the commercial properties of the affected. In most cases, neither their structures are illegal, hence they need not be compensated when dismantled. Strictly speaking, informal settlers in public lands who simultaneously use their residences as places of commerce are excluded from becoming beneficiaries of the socialized housing program. The assumption is that owning a business, they have the means to meet their own housing. This rule is meant also to discourage professional squatting. Additionally, the study observes that the Lina law is, and I quote, silent on other vulnerable groups like those in rental housing employees who have to quit their jobs or incur higher costs of transport and other expenses because of the enterprises have to relocate elsewhere, and the daily wage employees who have lost income in the days when the enterprise has to close and transfer to another site. And the communities on eviction policies. Added to this is a tendency of the courts to issue restraining orders against the eviction notices. The court's participation, however, is sanctioned by the Lina law. So my friends, that so far is my initial list of shelter concerns that may require a great deal of research and possible legislative intervention. If you think that I am trying to impress you with this list, I must admit that you are not entirely wrong. But the impression that I would like to leave with you is that these are issues that are very important, very urgent, and we, in my committee, are taking them extremely seriously. It is my intention to lay before you the roadmap and direction of my thrusts in the shelter sector in the next 3 years and in the years following. Just like last year, I wish to enjoin all of you to continue your advocacy for social change and your intensive quest for affordable and decent housing for the poor and the marginalized. The creation of the DHUD, I believe, shall be the start of our more dynamic partnership. Let me declare that I am always with you in your consistent and dedicated commitment, involvement as a private sector player and stakeholder in the shelter programs of this country. Let us all wish each other good luck. Maraming pong salamat sa inyong lahat. Thank you and good luck.